Well, I'd like to begin by thanking Brandon and Kimberly and your team for keeping us updated as efficiently and in such detail as you have. I think the main legislative event that has occurred has been the Success Act, and I know you're going to address that, as well as the various proposals that have not been enacted with respect to changes in the system. For example, the Stronger Patent Act that has been proposed. But other than saying thank you, I don't have much to add to your presentation. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Again, I'm Brandon Ritchie, Director of Government Affairs, and this is Kim Alton, Deputy Director, and we're going to do a two-pronged approach. We're going to give you an overview of legislation and some hearings and items of interest on Capitol Hill right now as they pertain to patents. And then we're going to do the second part will be focused on the Success Act and the report that we filed pursuant to that law. I'll do the legislative update, and Kim's going to do the Success Act update. So so far, we've had a lot of hearings, unprecedented amount of hearings with PTO witnesses. I believe the count is up to 5 this year already. And most recently, they did a hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee on the Stronger Act, which was legislation that was introduced by Senator Coons to make a lot of changes to patent laws and patent procedures at the USPTO. They also had a hearing on October 30th featuring our Commissioner, Drew Hirschfeld, before the Senate Judiciary IP Subcommittee. And that one was focused on patent quality issues at the USPTO. And it was a constructive hearing where folks were getting together to talk about potential improvements, and it was a good discussion. On December 3rd, on November 19th, the next one is that the House Judiciary Committee IP Subcommittee is going to do a hearing on the Appointments Clause issue in the Arthrex opinion. That's less than a week from today, so we'll be watching that. There will not be a PTO witness at that hearing. On the 3rd, the Senate Judiciary Committee IP Subcommittee hearing is going to do a hearing on trademark filings and the issues of non-use and fraudulent trademark filings. And of note, on December 11th, they're going to do a hearing on modernization of the U.S. Copyright Office. Just an interesting note there. Some of the hot issues right now on the Hill are deal with drug pricing. We're always monitoring those drug pricing bills just to make sure that we're able to offer technical assistance so that any bills that come about, if they touch on the patent system, do no harm. And we're doing a lot of education about that on the Hill so far. I feel like we've had some success patents in educating folks about the fact that patents are helping to create more products and improvements on products and things like that. And our talking points have been well received so far, and we're going to keep that up. Another big issue is Section 101 reform. There was a big push, as everybody knows, in the Senate earlier this year. Multiple hearings, dozens of witnesses. It was an extravaganza, and it kept us busy too. And there were a lot of proposals. They're still working on it. I'd say that they're in the stage where they are, I think folks are thinking about proposals, alternative proposals. So lots of ideas are being bantered around right now. But there's a lot of interest in creating more certainty with respect to the judicial jurisprudence on Section 101, patent eligibility issues. Let's see. Next, we have, as you've probably heard, we're probably going to see another CR until December 20th-ish at this point, and remains to be seen how Congress will tackle the appropriations bills after that point. It's one of those years where there are a lot of wild card factors, and it's hard to predict. but we're actively monitoring all these issues. Another thing of note is that this year there's been a lot of attention on IP issues. I used to work on the Hill on the House Judiciary Committee, and we definitely have had more activity on a broader range of issues in the last year than in a long time. Partly that's because I think the Senate had reconstituted their IP subcommittee, and naturally you're going to have more hearings on these issues, and there's a natural competition between the House and the Senate. But also because of some of the larger issues at play right now on the national landscape, IP is one of those issues. There's differences of opinion, but they don't break down based on party lines very often. It's more of the interests of the stakeholders. So it's an opportunity to continue working on these issues into next year, and it's not the case with most legislation. So we'll keep on top of all those efforts. Another trend, I would say, is there's been a lot of attention on in Congress on outreach and expanding opportunities for inventorship and entrepreneurialism, both for first-time inventors of all stripes and also for underrepresented groups. And so we've done a lot of work with Congress to help educate them about the efforts the PTO is doing and continues to do, has done, is doing, will continue to do. And also, we revamped our website to make it more accessible to independent, well, I should say first-time inventors, by having a link that takes you right to a map where putting ourselves in the shoes of the customer, getting them, they can click on their state and they can get all the resources that we partner with, other organizations with, or we offer that can help them get started. And so that's been very well received by the Hill, very well received by the feedback that we've gotten from stakeholders. So, but that's a big issue that Congress is looking at right now. Let's see. I'm forgetting to click this thing. This is where we'll start transitioning over to the Success Act presentation, and I will turn it over to Kim.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brandon. Good afternoon. We, as you all will recall, were required by legislation that was passed last year in Congress to produce a report by October 31st, 2019 on entitled the Success Act Report. And that report, what we were required to do was to really look at the data that is available, that's available publicly, that can show information on the demographics of the patents that are applied for and obtained, and really looking at women, minorities, and veterans. So the USPTO's Office of the Chief Economist took the lead in doing literature reviews and really looking to see what public data is available. As we discussed at the last meeting, PPAC meeting, there were public hearings that were held, and this all sort of came together with the report that we released on October 31st. Some of the key findings of the report are, no surprise, there's a limited amount of publicly available data on participation rates of these different groups. The little data that are available show that these groups are underrepresented as inventors, and then that there obviously is a need to try to collect more information to get a better handle on those participation rates. The report also looks at some of the key initiatives that the USPTO has to address this issue of underrepresentation, and so those are highlighted. I'll just mention a few. The first bullet is a collaborative IP program, and that's really referring to a IP toolkit that we are working on that will really target corporations, and because corporations are the largest filers of patent applications, but there is a real lack of diversity when you look at who is applying from these different corporations, who's submitting these applications to our office. So we really want to work with our corporate filers, and we think that this toolkit will be helpful on how to really demystify the process for many of their employees. We're also working on a awards program to really recognize individuals and organizations that are really doing standout work related to diversity. And we also are working to create a innovation and inclusiveness council. And that council will be made up of representatives from the private sector, nonprofits, universities, really having all of these different groups, all of these stakeholders come together to help develop a national strategy on how do we address the issue of really expanding the pipeline and the diversity of candidates that are coming to the office. And then finally, there's a lot that the USPTO does now related to STEM education and innovation education with K through 12 and college students, and we certainly want to continue the work that we're doing in that area. So that's everything that's on that left column. That right column are some of the recommendations that would require congressional action. And so the first is if Congress would enact legislation that will allow us in a more streamlined fashion to gather demographic information, enhance our authority to work with our federal interagency partners who we think could be helpful in collecting this type of data, and then expanding sort of the purposes and scope. There are several federal programs, and we worked closely with the SBA on this report. The SBA has grants. There are other federal agencies that offer federal funding to individuals that they can use related to innovation and invention. And we would just are hoping that some of those grants could be expanded so that maybe some of the money could be used for perhaps filing fees here at the PTO or other issues to help to promote IP. So that is kind of a big picture overview of the report. And I'll turn it back over to you for our legislative priorities for this Congress.
Okay. So just in general, we've mentioned a lot of the work that we're doing. One thing that we didn't mention yet, and it's more of it's a trademark thing, but it's worth noting because it's kind of a big effort, and that is that there's a lot of attention being paid, as we mentioned, to this issue of fraudulent filings of trademarks, and Congress is considering statutory changes to allow for potentially canceling marks and things like that, some kind of proceeding to expedite separating the wheat from the chaff when it comes to marks that were never used. So worth noting, even though this is PPAC, that's pretty big initiative, and it would involve some changes. So we're working with the Hill to provide technical assistance on that too. Our legislative activity, just to summarize, I would say a lot of these things you could summarize by saying continued certainty. Continued certainty in promoting innovation and protection of IP rights. Whether it be continuity of service issues to make sure the PTO is able to operate even during fiscal or weather emergencies and things like that, to working with Congress on the Section 101 reform, technical assistance, to making sure that there aren't unnecessary or harmful changes to the patent system as Congress considers the drug pricing issue. And again, it's a lot of education that we're doing, a lot of technical assistance, and of course we also list there the IP attaché rank. We've been working with other agencies and the Hill to see if we can elevate the work that those good employees do for all the stakeholders in other countries. So yeah, with that, we can kind of end the presentation and open it up to questions.
Questions from the committee? Thank you. I think it was nice to see the report came out before this meeting for the Success Act. However, I know I did get some comments from particularly inventors, individual inventors and small business owners who I think were very excited about the idea of the Success Act, but didn't necessarily feel that some of the comments and suggestions that they made to the office were fully appreciated. Maybe that's the best way to put it. So I would assume you're not, often at times you complete something, and I think people, and you have a report now, right? And I even have a copy. It's a plug right there, right? Yeah. But how'd I do? But I think at times people forget, particularly here at this office, as I've learned, just because you've touched on it, you've worked on it, does not mean it's done. And so, I think folks would like to know that this is an ongoing process. This isn't, it's going to be something that's going to be, actually difficult to tackle because you just don't have that data relatively available. And it's nice that you have legislative activity that says go do this, but sometimes it's not easy just to wave the wand and create what they want. So maybe keep that in mind, or just keep it going, right, with the user community, right, Julie? So
the Success Act in particular is so important, and I know everyone is aware of the issues, and I think the time is appropriate, especially since the director is focused on it too here, and your own diversity within the organization is great. So I think this is it can't stop with a report, the questions and receiving more information, so that further analysis can be done, but then pulling the trigger, if you will, to really get programs in motion and then measuring them.
and even our suggestions, we do not take offense, but even our suggestions from the committee were not included in the report. So, but we know that this is an ongoing activity and it's something that actually the PAC finds very important. So, and we will continue to find ways to work together so we can all have an impact. Ha ha. Sorry.
We can just real quickly completely hear what you're saying and agree. The director and the deputy director, they're very fully committed to expanding the innovation ecosphere. And what I like to say when we're on the Hill, which is absolutely true, is that our efforts to expand the innovation ecosphere did not start, nor will they end with the Success Act. The PTO was already well underway with their pretty groundbreaking gender study before the Success Act was even thought of. Now, I was on the Hill and helped pass the Success Act as a staffer there, but the PTO was already working on this, and we just have so many programs that do outreach to all these groups, but more can be done. And so it didn't start, nor will it end with the Success Act report, and plans are already underway to roll out a lot of these initiatives that Kim laid out. And so it's definitely a priority for the agency. So we hear what you're saying and agree. And Kim, did you have anything else to add?
No, just thank you for that feedback, and let's continue to talk about how we can work together, because I think we all want the same outcomes.
Great. Anything else on that? Thank you so much. I inadvertently skipped over special projects for Bernie, and so we're going to segue to Bernie.
All right. Thanks, Mary Lee. So the Special Projects Committee basically is a committee that looks at sort of unique issues within the patents organization from year to year. And this year we looked at 4 issues. One was the Success Act, which Kimberly and Brandon just spoke about. The second was how the regional offices operate. The third was the interaction between the PTAB and patents. And the fourth was the OED diversion issue. So let me take the Success Act first, since it's already been discussed. In our report, we recommended that the office analyze whether incentives could be given to underrepresented groups to incentivize them to file patents and to participate in the patent system. And we didn't see that in the PTO's report, but we were assured by Kimberly that you're going to establish a council to look at further initiatives the agency might engage in. And as part of that council, you'll take up our recommendation. Do I have that correct, or?
Yes, there's already some thoughts being put into exactly how to go about establishing the council, and that would be the forum to talk about the PPAC recommendations and any others that you may have in the future.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. That's great. And we understand that there may be legal hurdles and other hurdles to provide incentives, but we were hoping that you'd at least take a look at it and then, let the user community know why you can or can't do certain things. So that'd be great. Thank you. Then the second thing we looked at were the regional offices. We met with the regional directors. We met with the deputy director, and the overarching issue with the regional offices was there are regional directors in each of the regions, and there's also in the patents organization technology center directors. So a lot of people in the user community are confused about, are the roles the same? Are the roles different? Because they're both called directors. So if you look at our annual report, we delineate it with, I think, a lot of specificity. In a nutshell, the regional directors are very different from the technology center directors. The technology center directors manage the patent examiners up through the commissioner for patents. So the commissioner for patents manages all the patent examiners on down. The regional directors do not. The same thing with the board. Even though there are board judges in each of the regions, the chief judge of the board manages the board judges. The regional directors really operate within their regions as outreach coordinators for the PTO, and they do a lot of coordination with respect to outreach and education within their regions, and that's a very valuable, resource for the agency. But a lot of people were confused. Do they actually manage the patent operation? And they don't. Another thing that's really important to understand is that when you look at the hierarchy of the PTO, if there's a vacancy, for example, in the director or deputy director, under the department's organization order, it would be the commissioner for patents, the commissioner for trademarks, and the other executives who would normally fulfill a vacancy and be in the acting position. The regional directors are not in line to act as the director of the PTO should there be a vacancy. So they do operate on a sort of a different track than the other PTO executives. The second thing we looked at were the operations of the regional office, and they do a lot of great education within their regions. One of the things we recommended is that a couple of things. One was that the regional offices look at what other services they could provide directly to the user community. And then second, that the agency conduct sort of a cost kind of benefit analysis of the regional offices. For example, is the PTO really getting value? Is the user community really getting value in each of the regions based on the cost of operating those offices? Then moving on to the interaction between patents and PTAB. PTAB already discussed today the study that they basically conducted two studies with our committee. One was the overlap between reissue and reexamination in a PTAB trial. And they've already gone out with more guidance, which was issued this year. They discussed it already today, and that was great. The second area that they've looked at, and this is a little newer area, is the operation of 325D. And what that is, for those who don't know, is when prior art or arguments were already considered by the office during examination, when those same arguments are made subsequently to the board can basically not look at those arguments and not institute on those arguments because they've already been addressed by the patent operation. Our recommendation with respect to 325D was that the board come up with further guidance for when the board will actually consider that prior art or arguments have been addressed during patent examination or, for example, in an ex parte examination. So they're going to take a look at that. Finally, on OED, the diversion program, we looked at it again this year because we gave a couple recommendations last year and we wanted to follow up on that. For those who don't know, the OED diversion program is a program where if a practitioner has engaged in misconduct, they're not disciplined, they can divert the discipline. And it happens where someone engages in misconduct because of, for example, a substance abuse issue or a mental health issue, or because of simple negligence. And they can avoid discipline in that situation. Last year, we recommended that the Office of Enrollment and Discipline do two things. One was to do more outreach on the program so that the user community was more aware of it. And second, that anytime there's an investigation of a practitioner, they notify the practitioner of the availability of this program. And we're happy to say that the Office of Enrollment and Discipline has adopted both of our recommendations. Everyone who is given a request for information when a complaint is filed is given a brochure that they developed on our recommendation describing this program. So big kudos to Will Covey and his office and Sarah Harris for doing that. And those are the issues we looked at this year, and we look forward to working with the PTO again next year. Thank you.
I have to commend Bernie because he comes in with a special expertise as being former general counsel for USPTO. And so when I was trying to figure out what the appropriate subcommittee for Bernie to do, I just figured I'm just going to give him special projects. And he took it, he ran with it, and he figured out all of these great topics that the committee needs to be looking at and taking from different areas of the office. So I want to thank you a lot for the effort. So. Any questions with respect to what Bernie presented, or no? I will say we are reading, and one of the comments made me chuckle. We got a comment trying to get more detail of why we're going to have, or suggesting having, a commemorative stamp, since I said earlier that no one mails anymore. So, so point noted to the ether. So, yeah, we're good. So with that, I think, do you have any closing comments, or?
No, I would just like to close by saying, one, it was a great meeting, but two, I'd like to thank Mary Lee and Bernie and Jeff for their great work. And we were saying at a break at how just quickly the time seems to have flown by with all of you on PPAC. So thank you for your service and work on PPAC. I've been fortunate enough to be involved for a long time on PPAC, and the three of you have really moved the ball in terms of facilitating a really productive working relationship with PTO and PPAC, and I'm very appreciative of those efforts, and so thanks again for everything.
Thank you, Drew. Just a big thank you to everyone, and on the record, it has been such a joy to be part of this process, so thank you, and appreciate your oversight and support and stewardship for everything that we've been doing, and such an honest dialogue. I think one thing that you should know is when you reach out to these folks, they really try to address and understand your concerns, and Drew, you've been just exemplary in that area, so I really thank you a lot. Thank also my Vice Chair Julie for keeping me on track and just helping me run a great meeting, and much appreciated. And so with that, I'd like to move to close the meeting. Have a second? Second. All right, thank you. All closed. Bye.